Welcome back to another Cinema Talks video, and today I am breaking down the Stranger Things Season 5 finale. So this finale was insane and ended Stranger Things perfectly in my opinion. It had so many great heartfelt and action-packed moments that ended this series perfectly. So today we're going to be breaking down this episode one last time. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this episode, but let's jump right into the breakdown. So the episode opens with the military following the team to the Upside Down as we get this nice scene between Mike and Eleven, which to me felt like a final goodbye between the two of them. Then we see Eleven, Callie, Murray, and Hopper make their way into Hawkins' lab as Eleven knows what she must do. We then get a nice moment between Erica and Mr. Clark, and it was so great to see Mr. Clark in on the action in this episode. Then we get the rest of the group heading up to the top of the radio tower in the Upside Down as Vicky and Max are posted up in the radio station in the right side up. We then see that Eleven is now going to find Vecna in the Mindscape by using her old tank from Season 1. Then as the rest of the group heads up the radio tower, we get this nice talk between Mike and Will where they reaffirm that they are still best friends. We then see Max get pulled into Eleven's mind to help Callie and Eleven fight him. They then get transported into a memory of Henry and Hawkins High as Max guides the way. We then see Dr. K pull up to find Max and Vicky, but luckily Vicky hides her and Max. But then the team finds out that the tip of the radio tower is not lining up with the rift as Max, Callie, and Eleven make their way back into Camazotz. Eleven then just absolutely launches Henry through a window once they find him. But the radio tower does make contact with the abyss and it launches Steve to the edge of the tower and he seems to fall off. So this was insane for the Duffer Brothers to tease the death of Steve because, there was like a 5-second cut to black before we realized what actually happened. But Steve is then saved by none other than Jonathan. So I really thought that this was such a great and wonderful moment between the two of them. Now we see the whole team enter the abyss through a gate as this sets up one epic final fight. We then see an epic confrontation between Eleven and Henry, which was great, as we get this nice conversation between Steve and Jonathan as they talk about their relationship with Nancy and just their current relationship in a way. Now in the woods in Camazotz, we see all of the kids running to enter the cave that Vecna can't enter. But back at Hawkins' lab, we get an emotional scene when Vecna enters the mind of Hopper. Vecna shows him Eleven and Callie's plan as Hopper shoots it back at him, but Vecna shows him that he shot and killed Eleven. Hopper then breaks Eleven out of the tank, then this makes Eleven, Callie, and Max leave Camazotz, leaving Holly and the rest of the kids alone. Hopper then confronts Elle about her plan with Callie as we get this great motivational speech from Hopper to Elle. We then see Will tap back into the hive mind as he sees through the eyes of Henry and he approaches the cave. Henry then goes to face his fear and enter the cave as Holly and the kids try to escape Camazotz once and for all. But then the military pull up to Hawkins' lab and weakens Elle and Callie as Murray blows up the helicopter outside with C4 and Eleven is able to take out the military guards. But Callie does end up getting shot from the crossfire and bleeds out to her death. So now we see that the Duffer Brothers brought back Callie for Eleven's character arc and story arc in this season. But back at the cave, we see Henry wanting to face his fears to reach Holly and the kids as they try to escape. On the rooftop in Hawkins' lab, we see what feels like a final goodbye between Hopper and Eleven. Now at the cave, we see Henry as he opens up that briefcase. He encounters a piece of what looks like to be the piece of the abyss, or maybe the piece of the Mind Flayer. So in this moment is when we finally see how Henry got corrupted by the Mind Flayer. Will and Henry then have a conversation as Will tells Vecna that the Mind Flayer consumed him, but Vecna says that him and the Mind Flayer are one. Then over in the abyss, the structure where Vecna is unwraps to be a physical body of the Mind Flayer, as the gang tries to avoid the Mind Flayer. As we see that Eleven successfully made the jump to confront the Mind Flayer once and for all, as we get one of the coolest shots in the entire show. We then see Elle break through the Mind Flayer and she takes down Vecna from his vines and starts to fight him. So the rest of the gang decides to hurt the Mind Flayer from above as Nancy goes to serve as bait. Nancy lures the Mind Flayer to the edge of the cliff as Jonathan pulls up with a flamethrower, as everyone works together to hurt and take down the Mind Flayer one last time. Steve and Dustin get this great moment when they hurt the Mind Flayer from beneath and say, "This is for Eddie." Eleven is then able to get the upper hand against Vecna as she punches him to his spike. But when Vecna gets a burst of energy and fights back as he is about to Vecna her, this is when Will the Wise himself taps into the hive mind and takes control of Vecna. So this was such a great scene to see as Will tells Vecna that we are not afraid anymore. He then snaps off Vecna's arm and this gives Elle just enough time to use her full force and impale Vecna on the spike, as we see this result of the Mind Flayer collapsing to the ground as well. So this was such a great way to see Will and Eleven work together to defeat Vecna in a sense. We then see Nancy rescue Holly as Mike comes to hug Holly and Nancy, and this was such a great sibling moment between them. We then see all of our characters make their way around Vecna as he is struggling. Then Joyce drops the hardest line of the entire show as she begins to chop his head off, as everyone looks on, remembering their own way Vecna hurt him. This was such a great scene, and after a couple more shots, Joyce decapitates Vecna and ends him once and for all. Dustin then radios into everyone that they are ready to ditch the Upside Down. When they make it out of the gate, they are greeted with Dr. K and the military as they want Eleven. But when the military take them out of the truck, 11 is shown standing right out of the gate in the Upside Down. Mike runs after her as he falls into her mindscape, and they have one last and final conversation with her. And this scene was so emotional and great as they say their final goodbye to each other. So 11 decides the best thing to do is to sacrifice herself to end this evil cycle. Everyone looks on as the Upside Down is destroyed once and for all. We then time jump 18 months later, and it's revealed that Steve is a youth baseball coach, which was great. We then all find out that the kids are now graduating as we get this nice scene between Lucas and Max, as Dustin's mom is taking pictures of them, as we see Will with Hopper, Joyce, and Jonathan. We then see that Hopper is wearing his chief of police outfit, so he did end up getting his job back. Hopper then goes to find Mike as he is sitting on a bench at the memorial, and we get this emotional talk between Hopper and Mike about dealing with losing 11. Then we see Mike show up to his graduation as Karen has a nice moment with him as well. We then see Dustin giving a speech as he talks about his friends, he channels that Eddie Munson in him, and he flips the script. Dustin finally did what Eddie couldn't, and this was great to see. We then cut to Jonathan, Steve, Nancy, and Robin as they are sitting on the rooftop of the radio station. We learn more about where these characters are today, which was great to see, and they all did start saying nothing will ever be the same with their new life and friends. I loved this final scene between these characters, and it was a great way to send off their friendship. Then we finally see Hopper and Joyce eating at End Zones, as we then see Hopper propose to Joyce. Then the final scene of them two are them dancing together in End Zones. Now we cut to the Wheelers' house at the OG party plus Max are all playing D&D in the basement. And it was so great to see all of them playing D&D for one last time together. Now when the campaign does end, Max questions the ending about comfort and happiness, to where Mike responds with some wise words about the path that these characters are going to go on. We then finally get that day between Mike and Lucas at the movies as Mike is explaining their story. Mike explains that Dustin will keep studying and learning in the library, but he still goes on a trip with Steve every once in a while, who's his best friend. He then explains that Will the Wise travels to a new place where he finds his place in deep happiness. And as for Mike, he keeps telling stories as a storyteller. But the story he says he can't tell is about the mage. Mike goes on to say that the night 11 died, that Callie was actually still alive, and that when 11 died, it was all an illusion. So in reality, 11 escaped from the truck and went where no one can find her. We then see 11 in a small town with a waterfall as she at last finds peace and happiness. Then Karen calls down that dinner is ready as each character one by one gets up and puts their manual down for one last time. We then see all of them walk up the stairs as Mike is the last one out. Holly and all of her friends run downstairs to play D&D. So in this moment was a great passing down the torch from Mike to Holly. Mike looks on proud at Holly as he knows that this is the end of his adventure. So that is how Stranger Things ends as we cut to the credits. So overall, Stranger Things as a whole is great and will forever always be in my top tier shows. So let me know what you guys thought about the Stranger Things season finale because I thought it was such a great way to end this story. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.